Should people be imprisoned when they fail to pay child maintenance? And is there an alternative to this sort of non-payment? These are some of the questions we'll be hoping to answer this morning as I'm joined by President of the Single Fathers Association, Mr. Rhondall Feeles. Mr. Feeles, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us on Now.
Morning, Kimberly. Thanks for having me as always.
Of course, as always, I know we have a lot to discuss in this short time, but before we get into the laws as it relates to this type of non-payment, can you briefly describe the incident that would have led to this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that happened last week. We'd have seen an inmate pass away while being incarcerated for child maintenance. It's something that we actually saw some years ago as well, where an inmate at that point in time, I think he got into an altercation and he was killed in a fight years ago. This time, however, I know the commissioner of the prisons came out and said this wasn't an altercation of any sort, that the gentleman was ailing for some period and some time. And I mean, it spurred us once again to come back and show that it's a waste of time with us imprisoning men when they go to the prison. It's not helping the child. It's not beneficial to the child. It's not beneficial to the child's mother. It's not beneficial to the man himself when we imprison the non-custodial parent. You may hear me say men, but please be mindful that men aren't the only persons that pay maintenance. It's the non-custodial parents. And there is a small percentage of women that are non-custodial parents as well.
Yeah. Before we get into that, I just wanted to provide some context in terms of the laws as it relates to the child maintenance, because there's so many things we need to consider, whether it is they went to court to get that warrant, whether it is they made a separate arrangement. So can you give us some context in terms of what the law states as it relates to that?
Right. So what happens, you go to court, somebody will be granted custody, care, and control. Sometimes it's joint custody if it's a married couple. If the persons decide to, or if the custodial parent decides to, they can also make an application for a maintenance order. This was actually put in place so that they ensure the financial upkeep of the child by the non-custodial parent. So there are instances where we can see there's been a level of negligence, where sometimes it isn't paid. And for that reason, I think that is why a lot of the laws have come into fruition. But what we fail to realize as well, and a lot of us think it's because there's an absence of legislation, but I can guarantee you there isn't. We fail to realize that imprisonment, apparently to Parliament at that time in the drafting of the law, seemed to be a last resort. So we're seeing people going and apply for warrants for imprisonment. We're seeing magistrates sending the non-custodial parent directly to prison, while we have mechanisms already enshrined in law that we can use as very good alternatives. We have in section 27(2)(a) the seizure of goods and chattels. So if someone happens to have an arrears, meaning that they were negligent and arrears was accrued, their car can be seized. If they have jewelry, it can be seized and it can be held until this debt is paid. But we always only see the section 27(2)(b) methodology being utilized, where the person is held to sometime, give some time to pay. If they don't pay in that time, their committal warrant is then issued for them, and then they are carted off to prison. We are
Mr.
saying
Feeles, let's look at Mr. Feeles. Yes. So, but one of the things that you mentioned though was that some people fail to pay. Now I know that things have changed, but can we talk about how much somebody might be given to pay? Because I know sometimes I saw a figure of $150 per week. Of course, it also depends on how many children, that sort of thing. So walk us through the process in terms of how many, or an estimate, because I know you have seen cases where there are fathers or even somebody, the non-custodial parent, as you mentioned, would be forced to pay. And so can you give us an idea in terms of how much that would be? Because I've been seeing some figures like $150, maybe $200 per week.
Right. So it varies, and it varies on the person's income. So most times I would just give an average figure of my knowledge at about $800, sometimes $1,000, is based on the child's lifestyle, more to say, and the income that the parents have. So it's always, we always seem to see it as the non-custodial parent having to pay maintenance, but it's actually a contribution towards maintenance, so that you have the understanding that if the non-custodial parent is paying $800, it is expected, though it may not be legislated, to monitor the custodial parent's contribution, that the custodial parent is meeting half or meeting that same requirement as well. So the child will be actually maintained not on $800, but on $1,600 per month. So that's basically how they do it. The custodial parent may make an application tendering certain bills or or suggesting certain things like travel, food, education. If the child has other special needs, and these things will cause the maintenance to vary either up, or it can also cause it to go down as well.
Yeah. Recently, we also saw at least 7 people who were also chartered off to prison for non-payment as well. Does the court take into consideration, for example, let's say loss of job, any sort of circumstance that may prevent the non-custodial parent from paying child maintenance?
And that's the challenge that we're having. The challenge we're having, as I said, you're seeing that new culture. I wouldn't say new because I mean this always been from the beginning. That culture of just sending the person to jail, where we have laws like Section 27(4) that instructs the magistrate or judge to make a fair assessment of negligence to determine if this party has been negligent or is this party genuinely having an issue in their life where they've lost their job. Is this party genuinely having an issue where they are now fallen on some kind of health issue? We're talking to that gentleman. If there was a good and fair assessment, because the information coming to us that he was back and forth for the time period he was there to the medical facilities. So if this was brought forward to the magistrate's attention, this is definitely where she should have acted, because Section 27(4) of the Family Law Act specifically says that they should not be committed to prison if this is the case. So we are seeing things like this happening when there are so many better solutions. I just gave you the example on law, Section 27(2)(a), the seizure of goods and chattels. We have so many international best family law practices now that the family law and the family courts are totally aware of. We have shared parenting. So from the time the parents come for custody or a custody application is made, there are states in the United States already that start them at 50-50. So mommy has the child 1 week, daddy has the child 1 week. Nobody has to pay anybody else a maintenance. Right. So we institute things like shared parenting. We've done an assessment with our EU-sponsored program that we had there. We did a research on our courts, and we only have 8% of our orders made for custody are shared parenting custody orders, which is horrible. Yeah. So shared parenting is a brilliant suggestion as well. And another alternative, I think, is a super idea that I think that the judiciary must consider and take care of and take into consideration. We have ankle bracelets today. We see persons who are convicted for sexual offenses are released on bail and bond with these ankle bracelets with curfew conditions. I think instead of imprisoning a man for child maintenance or a woman for child maintenance, this is a better solution. You equip them with an ankle bracelet and you put them onto a parole or probation officer who will work with them to find a job for them and then have the money taken out of their earnings. Yeah. We have to remember the goal is not to teach somebody a lesson. Our goal is not to send somebody to prison. The goal is to get a non-custodial parent to contribute to the upkeep and the welfare of the child.
Now, Mr. Feeles, allow me to interject here only because we're almost out of time, but quickly, in terms as it relates to those who are allowed to get the child maintenance, in terms of the children. Now, I was on the court system, the judiciary, and I realized it also relates to biological children, those who have been with the family for some time. But I also know that you would have overseen one particular case where the father was paying child maintenance, and he realized later down that the child was not his biological son. And so how do we find an instance where at least the child can win in that particular situation?
Well, in that instance, I mean, once the man goes before a court and has the maintenance quashed, that's the end of the child maintenance there. But I have seen historically those guys who have found out the children weren't theirs still continue to maintain and have a healthy relationship with the children going forward, even though because they already built a bond and relationship with them prior to knowing that they weren't the biological father.
Yeah. And in terms of the age that the maintenance stop, I understand it's 18, but there can be special instances where it's extended to 21?
Yes, it can be extended to 21, particularly if the child is now embarking on tertiary education or some tertiary advanced or advanced technical education. they can apply again from 18 and it will be continued for the next 3 years to support
any
that.
way?
The maintenance then can be paid to the child directly at that point in time.
Yeah. As we're talking alternatives, we got an estimated figure in terms of 800, maybe 1,000 per month. Given the fact that people's circumstances and situations may change, is there any way the court may take into account the fact that maybe the payment needs to be altered? So, for example, if the non-custodial parent loses their job, can the court then say, okay, rather than pay 800, let's see if we can pay 5 or something that they're comfortable paying while they get themselves back on their feet?
Yes, it can be done. There's a variation of an order that can be made. The issue is sometimes to have a variation order heard. Sometimes the adjournment of these matters are so long, the maintenance continues to accrue. Another issue, there's also Section 21(2) that magistrates hardly ever use, where they can suspend and revive maintenance. So in instances when someone may have an injury, you just got out of an accident and you will heal, you fell off a ladder and broke your hand. These things or these times are times they need to utilize Section 21(2), where they can suspend the maintenance for a while and then revive it after the person is now healed and healthy again to be employed again.
Yeah. Mr. Feeles, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I know time was a constraint, but I hope that we were able to get a lot out of the interview. Always a pleasure to have you. And I know we're going to have you pretty soon again. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for the little time.
Take care. And that was Mr. Rhondall Feeles, president of the Single Fathers Association, talking to some alternatives as opposed to imprisonment when the non-custodial parent fails to pay their child maintenance. You're on the Now Morning Show. We're going to take a break and be right back. Stay with us.